Hello. Uh, Good evening, everybody. We're going to start uh, the night service. Welcome, everybody. Uh, we'll continue the study of the book of Job. I think that's right? Yeah, okay, get closer, right? I was going to say it this way, but after I, let me see. Mhm. Okay. So we started last couple of Sundays, start talking um, about this book. Um, how to spell it in Hebrew? It is Iyov. Iyov. That's how it's said in Hebrew. Iyov. I was gonna say it in that way, but I probably you won't understand that. So that's the reason I was trying to get close to that. Iyov. Um, the chapter 1, we started last Sunday, chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, I think. And we'll continue that. We'll do the verses 6 to wherever we get. Hopefully, we can cover some. If you know, that's fine. I would like to mention that this book, it is a beautiful book for his content, but also it is an enigmatic book because his content too. I have some here on my notes. For example, the description of the character. He was perfect. He was righteous. He was um, humble. He was always stay away from evil. He was, in other words, he was complete person, and he was well educated. And he don't have any. He was blameless, blameless. Um, you see, when you see this description of this man, it is make you think it's someone that is not from this earth, because when we read and we're trying to look people, especially now that nowadays they come in the next couple months, no, next month actually, next month we have the election campaigns and it's going on and the election time. You know, everybody is a righteous person. Every candidate is the right person for the position. Everybody is the well-known, the person who is a perfect fit for the position, and everybody claim themselves to be the person, to be the righteous, to be blameless, to be a person who is well-educated, who is perfect, who is uh, and this is, to me, it's interesting when now that I'm living here in the United States, seeing this, people call themselves that they believe in God, but honestly, this is me thinking. This is me thinking on my head. Who don't believe in God? I don't think everybody, unless call themselves atheists, otherwise you believe in God. Because you believe in God doesn't mean you are following God. And I think that's the misconception in the world we have today. But this man, he was a perfect man. But the description he's give to him in the first verses is also is well known to he's not with sin. He is with them. He's a sinner man. Even though he is a perfect, he have a fear of God. He is still a sinner person. He's a sin man, and he disclaimed that. For example, in chapter 7, verse 20 and verse 21, he said, "I'm a sinner," and we find through the book this expression that he say, I'm not a person that he never commit any mistake. I'm a sinner person. That description, it is powerful when we look at the book because that tell who is the person. We already studied that. They have seven sons, three daughters. They have a lot of wellness. It was sheep, camels, bulls, ox, many servants. His family celebrate every occasion as possible. They were a family to celebrate all the time and spend time together. They celebrate birthday, anniversaries, all the kind of festivities that you could think a family could celebrate. That was the family of this man. But he also made sacrifice. That's I just recapitulation the first 5 verses. He also makes sacrifice for each of one of his children. Every time he got opportunity, he makes sacrifice. Some scholars say that he makes sacrifice every week. Every week he makes sacrifice because he said, I don't know, they may sin in one of those festivities they celebrate, in one of those gatherings they may sin. I need to ask God for forgiveness. And he makes sacrifice to God for that. So not because they sin, because they did something wrong. It's because just in case they did something wrong. That attitude, I think it is interesting to me because how many times we pray to God and say, I may sin? Or how many times we come to God and say, forgive me because I may do something wrong? As a human being, we always try to cover ourselves, right? And we don't like to expose ourselves, especially in front of God. But this man offers sacrifice, and that's an interesting attitude that we read in this book. Verses 6 to 12. That was the next section we'll try to talk about. And in these verses, we found an expressions that it can become a little controversial because what is said, how it's expressed. For example, verse 6 to 12, if someone want to read it out loud. Chapter 1, okay?
Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, From where have you come? Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it. And the Lord said to Satan, Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, who fears God and turns away from evil? And Satan answered the Lord and said, Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him in his house, and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, Behold, all that he has is in your hand, only against him do not stretch out your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord.
All right. God allowed Satan to test him, trial him, and see if he really is the person God already describes. And remember the description God present to Satan is that he's an upright person, a blameless person. He is a fearing God person. He's a person who is turning away from evil. So in other words, he's a perfect human being. And now God allows Satan to trial him and test him. But in verse 6, we find the expression of this word, the Son of God. The Son of God. It was a gathering, according to the description, it's a gathering of people or celestial beings in front of God. Who are the Son of God? Who are the Son of God? Can be angels, yes. In another description, another way to call the Son of God, because and when we look through the Bible, we find that the definition, one of the definition is men or beings that worship God. For example, we find the description when Paul writes to Romans, and in Romans 8:14, he said about that we are the Son of God. We are the Son of God because we worship God. We adore God. We come to Him all the time and praise Him. That's the Son of God. And this occasion is the celestial beings, angels, and all the spiritual beings that come to Him and pray. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 2 and 4, we find again this expression, the Son of God. And in this situation in Genesis 6 is talking about the Son of God having sexual relationship with the humans. And that's how he come the giants or the monster, however you want to describe. But it's the same meaning in that situation. But the celestial beings is coming to God. To me, it's interesting when I read, especially that verse, finding that Satan, who is cast out from the presence of God, is among them. To me, it's interesting that passage because Satan already is cast out from the presence of God. But yet, he still can come into the presence of God. How's that possible? If you ask me, I don't have an answer. You won't have an answer. Probably we won't have an answer because, again, who are we? Like God talked with Job and said, who are you? Or where were you when I did this? Or where were you when I did that or did something that probably that will be the same answer if we ask God today, I'm talking while we are on this earth, ask God why Satan was among the angels if you cast him out before. Probably God will say, who are you to ask me that? So, God allowed who wanted to be in front of him. Remember when the encounter of Moses, if you remember the story, when he was in the desert and the burning bush. Moses tried to get close to him. When he tried to get close to the burning bush, the boys come from there and say, hold on, take off your sandals, because of the place you are standing now is a holy place. If you walk with your sandals, you will be annihilated. You will be dead, in other words. But before the warning, how I picture this is my imagination, how I picture this, is Moses already give one step in front of the area that's supposed to be holiness. But God warned him, and it stopped him to keep moving forward. So, isn't it God's wills who want to be in front of him? All right? Another interesting things that we find in this passage, verse 7, for example, is the word Satan. In the Hebrew, this word, it is translated as an adversary. That's the meaning of the word. Later on in history, the word was translated to Satan, like we know today. The transliteration is Satan, similar to what you found, the chemical you found in the hot peppers, or jalapenos, or ghost peppers, or whatever spicy food that you find. You know, that's the chemical that make spice or hot the pepper, Satan. That's the chemical. That's the same word used here in Hebrew, Satan. That's interesting to me because the terminology is adversary. So Satan later on was translated and given a name, a proper name, and translated as a Satan, talking about the adversary. Who's your adversary? Satan, right? But back in time, it wasn't, the adversary was the adversary. That's it. You don't have a name for the adversary. But in Hebrew, that's one of the passages that we found the word Satan, which is adversary. The question we found in verse 7, for example, is from where you been? That question is kind of a rhetorical question, but at the same time, it's interesting to read it because it kind of implies if somebody want to look into nitpick in the passage, we'll say, okay, God didn't know where Satan was. That's the reason he asked. So God didn't have a knowledge where Satan was or where he'd been before. So some people will say that's the intended message in here. But honestly, that's not the question per se. The question is, I want you to tell everybody where you've been. Like when we read 1 Peter 5:8, remember what the description of Peter gave to Satan? That he is around us like a lion looking to get devoured. So Satan he's not omnipresent. He cannot be in one place and another at the same time because he don't have the ability. God does. But you see the description, the answer Satan gave to God is saying, I've been everywhere. I've been in this place and been in another place, and I've been everywhere as possible. Because, again, Satan doesn't have the ability to be in many places at once. Only God has the ability, the omnipresent ability to be in different places at the same time. So, now the question comes after he answered and say, I've been everywhere. I've been looking around. I've been searching around. Remember when the angel of light, which is Lucifer, which is Satan, or the adversary, was cast out from the presence of God, he was sent into earth. That was his domain, the earth. That's the reason when Jesus came and died on the cross, he take the power and restrain him from this earth. Before, that's the reason we read in the Old Testament and part of the Jesus ministry, we found and we read the demons possessing someone. Because the devil have the ability to do it. Nowadays, the demon can possess someone, yes. But it's working differently like back in time because at the time, the devil have authority and power over this earth. That's the reason when Satan or the adversary tempted Jesus, remember he took it to the temple and put it in the pinnacle, in the highest place, and say, look, see everything here. And he showed all the cities, the beauty of the places this earth have at the time. And say, all these belong to me, and I can give it to you if you bow to me and worship me. Why Satan offered that? Because at the time, Satan had the power and authority over the earth. Up to a point. I'm not saying that he have control over everything, but Satan have, and he claimed himself that he have power over this earth. That's the description we found in Revelation about Satan. He's chains down. Because now he still can move around, but he cannot move freely like he did before Jesus died on the cross. So, saying this, the question now from Satan to God is, God present a Job and said, have you seen this man? And Satan says something, implies something interesting here. It is that every man have a price. This expression is interesting to me. When I read the Bible, when I read the human history, and when I look our society today, every man have a price. Why every man have a price? The bravery, the corruption, that's something, for example, back in my country, El Salvador, or Latin America, you will see that's a common thing to see all the time, corruption. How the money, power, or authority can buy things. I know here in the United States, we don't talk about corruption, but I would say if it's a human running the government, I would say we have corruption. It's not no want to talk about it, but I will leave it alone because I don't want to get in trouble. But every man have a price. And Satan implied this. We read, for example, verse 9. He said, then Satan answered to the Lord, does Job fear God for nothing? Notice the question. When we come to church, and this is a question I wanna move it back and forth between history and also nowadays. When we come to church, why we come to church? Have you think about it? Now this is the question that Satan does to God. Does this man fear God for nothing? He does because he really wants to fear to you, or because he know he can get something from you? In other words, Satan is saying no one serve God free. No one serve God free. The ego part of the human being is so strong that Satan is implying to that part. And he's saying he's doing everything right, he's doing everything good toward God because he blessed him. Remember how many children he have? 10 total. Which is 10 is a number in the Hebrew, it means completeness. And he have 7 sons, which is perfection. Have 3 girls, which is mean perfection too, but in the celestial and the spiritual area. And the 10, which is complete in earthly things. He have tons of animals, which, how it's described, he said that no one have the wealthy that this man have. So why this man is so fearful to you? Obviously, if you give everything to him, he will be fearful to you. He will be a good servant to you because you give everything to him. In other words, you spoil him. But now the psychology probably will disagree with that, because now we know that if you spoil your child, instead of being a fearful person, will be totally opposite. And that's the reason we have our society today. And you have heard the Generation X, Generation C, and now I've been hearing this expression. I know that the name of the generation is given by the previous generation. The new generation is called the generation of the crystal generation. And you know why they call it the crystal generation? Because everything, it is replaceable. Everything is replaceable. If they don't get what they want, what they do? Cry. Like a spoiled child, right? If they don't get what they want, they cry. Why we see so many craziness in this world today is because that generation is growing so much. And I'm fearful for my children because I know they're growing in that generation. They have everything. Everything that, for example, your parents that grew up and were raised in the Great Depression, they learned how to save, right? That's the reason they save everything. Later on, we have the boom after the war, however you say it. You have those kids that start learning to do more things in the technology events, right? And how the technology events, and they start doing everything better. Then we have the next generation that learn to swerve in between the two, the no technology and the technology. Now we have the new generation, they have everything. It's interesting to see if you ask, for example, the new new generation about the dial tone phone. Remember the rings? I saw it. I decided I grew up. I was born later on, but I saw those telephones where you have to dial. And for example, in my town, when I was little, we didn't have a home phone, so I have to go to a place to make the call, ask somebody to make the call for me. Then he called, make sure somebody answered, and he said, hold on, and he started moving wires around and plug it and send it to, say, number 3. I have to go to the booth number 3 and pick the phone and make sure the person answers and say, okay, you're good. And he unplugged everything and things that I saw. I know I'm not that young, but things that the new generation don't understand. Everybody have a price. But why? Why Satan know that everybody have a price? Because he's the master of the deceitful. That's the reason he knows that. He always offered great things. But at the end, he doesn't give you he doesn't deliver what he offered to you. And Satan knows that God will do it. If he promised something, he will deliver it. Why? Because he is God. The book is not, as Carl already mentioned, it's not an explanation of the suffering, but it's more the exaltation of the religion without interest. You serve God without interest. Regardless if God bless you, you serve him. Regardless if God heal you, you serve him. The religion without interest, where we do things for God because he deserves it, regardless if he does what we want. Because if you see, Job have everything. That's the reason God allowed Satan to test him and trial him, but he put a limit. And the limit said, you can touch him, you can do whatever you want, but don't touch his life. Don't put a hand on him. And that's how we see how the situation developed in here. And God allows Satan to make him lose everything. Verses 13 to 19, we found the calamity. How this man overcome the calamity. We find 4 calamities in these passages. And every calamity, one after other, he suffered one after other. And this is interesting because we see forces, different forces acting in here. We see forces from this earth, but also we see celestial forces or spiritual forces acting. And we see the 4 points of the earth acting too. For example, we read verses 13 and it said, now on the day of when his son and his daughter were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them. And then the Sabeans attacked and took them. They also slew the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Who's the Sabeans? The Sabeans came from the south. They were the neighbor people from the south. They came from the south and attacked them. Then we keep reading, and he said, while he was still speaking, notice this, another also came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servant and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you. Fire, a storm, lightning struck and killed everybody. And that was from the west. While he was speaking, another also came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands and made a ride on the camels and took them and slew the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone escaped to tell you. The Chaldeans came from the north. We have the Sabaeans from south, and now the Chaldeans from north. We have from the skies coming and destroying them from west. Then we have, while he was speaking, another also came and said, your son and your daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came from across the wilderness, and it struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they died, and I alone escaped to tell you. The wind, it came from the east. You know that wind is what we now see today, that meteorologists and all this. That's exactly the same wind that bring the Sahara dust. That's the same stream. But in that area, for some reason, that day, the path of and where the wind wasn't over the tent where they were celebrating. So we see one after another situation. What he did? Just listen. So far, that's what is described, right? He just listened. I heard this, and I know some of you have the experience. I cannot speak about the experience because I have not lived it. But I heard this expression a lot. It's nothing worse to lose a son or a daughter. Because oftentimes, as a father or as a mother, you're thinking, I will be the first one to be gone, not my son, nor my daughter. I don't know by experience this, but that's a great pain. I see it. I look at people's face, words, expression. That's the worst things that can happen. Lose a children. This man suffered the death not just of one, but all 10. When? Over a span of 10 years? No. In the same day that he lost everything else. What is the reaction from this man? What is the reaction in front of the calamities? We find verse 20, and he said, then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head, and he fell to the ground. And notice this word. What he did? Worship. Worship. We find, during this time, we find different words that's mentioned here. He arose, he tore, he shaved. That's part of the typical dual situation at the time. When somebody's suffering, that's what they did. Yes?
Having all those possessions didn't make him lose trust or his faith in God or his need for God. But then when he finds himself at the lowest, that also doesn't take away his spiritual connection with God. And so even if he had all the money in the world for none of it at all, he still continued to
Like I said before, that's the religion without interest. Without interest. Now, God take everything. Well, Satan take everything. No, God. Satan take everything from him. His response was worship. Worship. What better place to be to worship God? Before I talk already about what I mean worship and what involved in worship and all the stuff, and at the end, worship is just being in the presence of God. What a better place to be. If you lose everything, earthly speaking, you lose your animals, you lose your servants, you lose your possessions, what a better place to be in front of God. If you lose your family, your children's, what a better place to be in front of God. And then he continued, said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. This verse, especially verse 21, and I'm closing in here, it is the famous verses, and it's used a lot in many situations, especially in the morning time, when somebody's mourn or death or someone. It's used a lot, this passage. But what he's making reference is to the condition that when we come to this world. We come to this world with nothing. That's the most beautiful time for me. See, my children were born, especially the first one and to the last one, the fifth one. I enjoy being in there, seeing how they came. Was a little hectic with the last two because for that condition, but it was exciting still. Yes, Sean. And probably you read my note because one of my favorite philosophers and thinkers at the time, it is Soren Kierkegaard. Hopefully I said right in English the name. I know it's a German. Soren Kierkegaard, I think. Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard is a philosopher, anyway. When he was making one of his studies about this book, he mentioned, he said, what Job is saying in this verse is basically putting in perspective what you got, what you have. It was given by God. Notice that he didn't say, the Lord take it away. Notice that he doesn't say that. He said that first, the Lord gave to me, or gave it to me. And then after he said that, he said, the Lord take it away. So if you understand, if you come to the realization that who gave it to you, prepare you to better understanding the suffering. Only then we can bear suffering, when we understand who gave you what you have. If he give you how you get what you got, or who gave you what you have, you will realize that the same person who gave you, the same being who gave you things, he can take it away. Yes. I know. Yeah. Yeah. So, what we learn from here, one, it is God regardless. Our relationship with God, put it in perspective. How profound, how deep is our relationship with God? How much is our price? How much price we put to what we do for the Lord? We do it because we receive blessing, or just because we want to be with the Lord? How profound is the relationship with God? Worship God because all the blessings are blessing, not because we deserve it, because our blessings. We need to persevere and be faithful. Not because how much God bless us, it's because, again, God is God. I think that's the best way to end the chapter 1 of Job. And he said, and among everything that happened, the verse 22 said, Job never say something against God. Never did something that offended God. How often we try to comprehend our suffering and say, why this happened? Or how often we think and we take for granted all the blessings that God bless us already. Put in perspective what God gave to you. If you put in perspective, you'll understand. If God gave it to you, God take it away. So if you want to receive the greatest blessing of the world, Jesus Christ, the Son, who came to this earth, died on the cross for your salvation, for my salvation, if you want to receive that, tonight is your opportunity. If you think you take it for granted, the blessing, the greatest gift of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and you wander away and start thinking, I earned this, this belonged to me because I worked for, let me tell you, if you wander away, today is your time that you can come back to Jesus while we sing and stand together.